everyone? Welcome back to another I Lost My Podcast interview. I'm your girl, Mechi G, author of the book I Lost My Mom, Now What? Memoir of a Motherless Daughter, which is available on Amazon. But today I'm super excited to introduce our special guest that we have. I had the honor of interviewing someone who is not only a mother, a daughter, a friend, a soon-to-be wife, but she is my sister, and I'm so honored that she took the time to participate in my podcast and wanted to share her side of grief as it pertains to losing my mother, or our mother, and her grandmother, her beautiful grandmother, who passed when she was a teenager. So I'm super thankful to introduce to you guys my beautiful sister, Shontell. I hope you all enjoy this interview, and let's get into it. All right. Hi, Sean. Welcome to the I Lost My Podcast. I just want to start by saying thank you for agreeing to be a part of my podcast and sharing your experience with the grief of our beautiful mother. So I'm going to start by saying, introduce yourself and your loved one that you want to talk about today.
So if I were going to introduce myself, I would say that my name is Shontell. Mm-hmm. I am a Native Nashvillian, which is now something of a unicorn, I believe. Mm-hmm. I am a mom of two beautiful adults, Sean and Jay, 24 and 27. And I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm not, and I'm a friend.
Yeah. And then who is your loved one you're talking about today?
So as we talk today about grief and loss and loved ones, I probably am thinking chronologically in years. And so the first person that's nearest and dearest to me that I lost when I was 15 was my grandmother, who helped raise me, honestly. So between my grandmother and my mama Deborah probably is a volume of things to share.
Yeah. Can you describe your grandmother and your mother as a person? Like, who were they as people, and what did they mean to you?
So, my grandmother, my grandmother, Beatrice Thomas, my grandmother, Eunice Firestone, and my mama Deborah, collectively have been the three people in my life who have grounded me consistently. And so, of course, my mama niece is still living, and she's going to be 89 on the 12th. But together, I think my grandmother, Beatrice Thomas, who really had me since I was a baby, really helped to show me some strength, some structure, and to deal with difficult things. Mm-hmm. So through her, I learned how to overcome a lot of things. Mm-hmm. If I were to go directly to my mom and Deborah, I would say I don't really remember having a relationship with my dad before my mom and Deborah. When I met her, my dad and her had married. I think I was maybe three or four. Mm-hmm. And I just remember from early on how... Are you shaking your head to me? Oh, okay. Should I start over? Okay. I just remember early on, I remember the way she smelled. I remember the way she wore her hair, that her skin, I always thought she had the most beautiful skin. And I just really wanted to be like her. And I liked spending time with her. And one time, there were a lot of simple things that girls take for granted, for instance. And so I remember one time I was over on a weekend, and this was before the age that we started going to nail shops and things like that. And I remember her talking to me about my nails and telling me that if you soaked your nails in lemon juice and salt, lemon juice and salt, that it would help them stay strong and help them stay white. That was a really, really long time ago, so I might have the advice wrong. But I mean, nobody had ever talked to me about my nails before. That was just, you know, so it was things like that that really stayed with me. And then she would always be the person that would take me school shopping. And she would be the person that I would come to talk to about heartaches and heartbreaks. And, you know, she was everything. Now, there's a lot I'm not saying because I don't know how much I want to say, because I don't know how emotional I want to get or I don't want to get. But when I tell you that at 18, I became pregnant with my first child, my son, and I was really afraid of disappointing people who had expected me to go do this and to go do that. And you know how it is when, you know, there's a whole buildup of who people expect you to be, and then something happens, and for people, they show you not necessarily love at first or acceptance, they show you disappointment. I remember that year she bought me a necklace. That was the year I got the necklace with an S on it. And she just always supported me. She never said anything about being disappointed. You know, nobody goes out, well, I don't want to speak for everybody or generalize, but I didn't set out to become a pregnant, unwed person at 18 or 19. But when life takes you down a path and you make a decision, you go with your decision. And so she supported me. And there came a time when I moved into my very first apartment, and I didn't have anything. I had a baby bed, and I had a couch, and I didn't have a bed, and my son slept in a baby bed, and I would sleep on the floor by the baby bed. And so my mama Deborah, she came one day, and she came with Dee, she came with Jeff, I don't know if you remember this. I know. And she had a microwave, she had a vacuum, she had towels, she had all these things, foundational things that you needed to get started in life that I hadn't even thought about.
Oh, what's up? Do you want to be a super listener? Do you want to support the ILM Podcast? Well, it's easy, it's simple. All you have to do is go on Cash App, type in I Lost My Podcast, all lowercase. Go to Venmo, type in I Lost My Podcast, all lowercase, or even PayPal, and type in the same, I Lost My Podcast, all lowercase, and make any type of donation that you see fit. Here on this podcast, we're looking to do some great things. Improving equipment, that's part of it. So, simply put, be a super listener. Invest in us, grow with us, and watch where we take this podcast. So, donate. A penny, $1, it doesn't matter. Anything is welcome. We thank you for listening. Now, back to the show. I know you know it's interesting, right?
She had all these things that I hadn't even thought about. So, if that's any idea to how close we were or what she meant to me, I could stop there, but I could go on and say that when I got married for the first time, she was there, and for other reasons that we're not going to discuss here, she was the only parent there that day that was representing me, along with Daddy James and my grandmama Nisi. And I just remember
All the time. You know the training.
I just remember being upstairs in the room getting dressed, and you know, she was there, Yvonne was there, and I just remember crying, starting to cry. And she was looking at me and she was like, "This is your wedding day. What are you crying for?" And I don't know. But anyway, she got me together. We got on down, and we got married. Okay, life happens. When I got married the second time, she was there again, and she did not say, "I told you so," or she did not say, "Don't do this" or "Don't do that." With everything, she prayed for me, and she encouraged me to pray, and so. Those are some things I'll share on my own. Now, if you have questions, then you're welcome to ask me questions.
Off camera.
Yeah.
So you kind of gave some good memories, but if you can think of any other good memories, something that comes to mind for your grandmother and for mom, just the greatest memory you'll always take with you.
So for my grandmother, Beatrice, she could make a meal out of nothing. But the thing I remember about her is that when I would be up in the mornings getting ready to go to school, my girlfriends would come over. She watched them in the morning for their mom too. There was always a first breakfast and a second breakfast. The first breakfast was always, kind of like maybe some sausage and cereal for us and some juice. And then when we were getting ready to go to the bus stop, then she started second breakfast, because this would be the breakfast for my grandfather. And it would always be bacon and sausage and eggs, or potatoes and homemade biscuits. And we never wanted to go to school. We wanted second breakfast. And I remember leaving and having all my aunts gravitate to the porch, and they would sit out there and drink coffee. I remember that. I remember that she is the reason why I drink coffee, because she would drink her coffee in a saucer, and the coffee would spill over, and she would let me drink the coffee out of the saucer. And so, lots of fond memories, but those are ones of her. If I could just say, my mom and Deborah, there are just so many memories. I remember times when I would be depressed or going through something, and I would always try to stay away during those times because I knew she could read it on my face, she could read it in my voice. And so I would just say, well, I'll check in with her in a week or so when things are better, whatever that was. And my phone would always ring, and she would always say, you know what she would always say? Well, I hadn't heard from you. What's going on? Is everything all right? And you just couldn't hide it from her. She had a way of knowing. And so that memory, as well as, there's just so many. A lot of parental lessons, from setting your child up and getting them started with a good foundation, to remembering when Jay was a baby and I had my first little car, and she got me AAA for Mother's Day. After my car had stopped one night, I was living out this way, coming down Dickerson Road, and my car had stopped. After that, she got me AAA for Mother's Day, and she renewed it every year until, I was old enough to take it over myself. But who thinks like that? Who thinks that far in the future about what their kids need and what they want to do to help them be successful? So I appreciate that. I appreciate the type of wife she was. I appreciate her faith and her advice that always rings sound in my head every time I want to go left on somebody. She would say to me, you make sure you're always doing what you're supposed to do. You make sure that you're always doing the right thing, no matter what. But you make sure you're doing the right thing. And so in the back of my mind, when things are happening, I hear her voice all the time.
Okay. So we're going to switch, gears a little bit. So we're going to go back to the day where you lost both of these ladies.
Okay.
Do you remember, or can you describe the day that you lost your grandmother and your mother? And what did that day look like for you? What were your thoughts throughout the day?
The day that I lost my grandmother, she had been in Mechi G Hospital, and at that time where I was staying, we didn't have a house phone. And I was going to catch the bus to Mechi G to see her because I was 14 at that time. And before I could get started with the day, Daddy James came over. Daddy James never came over. And so I knew that if somebody had sent him to get me, then that was probably pretty major. So he came by, he said that they had sent him to pick me up. And when we got over to my grandmother's house, I just could feel that had happened. And so it felt like the ground beneath me really had just fallen away. Everything changed after that. My grades, my outlook, and if I fast forward to losing our mama Deborah, I would say that the day started actually the night before, and we were gonna have a big celebration. She had been not feeling well, and this day she was herself almost. She was upbeat, she was laughing, and I just remember you and I having a conversation. Well, maybe we don't need to stay over tonight. Maybe we can go home and let her get some rest. She seems like she's okay today, and it just. Now, somewhere in me, I have to admit now, I thought, okay, what you think with okay. But I felt like maybe that's the devil trying to steal his joy for this moment, and I'm not going to give my brain to that. If I feel like she's, enjoying herself, then I need to let her enjoy it and not stay here and loom and watch, And so we left, but the day was wonderful. Her and Josh were cutting up, and she's cutting up with all of us. And I left, and I remember getting a call early that next morning or later in the night from Dad, and I was hearing him, but I wasn't hearing him, And so by the time I could get myself together, you guys had already gotten to the hospital, and I just thought, okay, no, not right now, not yet, We were waiting on Junior to be born, but I knew she was tired. I knew she was tired, and when I looked at her, I could feel she was tired. And I didn't have any right to say, don't go. It wasn't, it was very selfish. Looking at her, I felt like I had been very selfish in wanting her to stay here when obviously God was saying, no, you're coming home so I can reward you, so I can heal you. You don't have to stay down there to be healed. So,
yeah. How has losing her affected you, if any?
Well, it has affected me in that I could always talk to her about the difficult stuff of relationship. Because when I became grown, we had grown woman talk. So it wasn't just the, teenage mother to questions. We had talks about, sex and, and arguments and decisions and why you might do this as opposed to that, and why you would stay in a situation as opposed to leave. And I felt like her advice was honest and sound, and it was based on faith. And I don't really have that. I didn't have that. Mama Niecy is always going to be the standard as far as faith. I know that she's the rock of faith. And we have grown woman conversations now as well. But Deborah really was the first person who we could have real heart-to-heart about things that were going on with me personally that I wouldn't necessarily share with other people. So, yeah.
What's up, ILM podcast supporters? It's your girl Mechi G stopping by real quick. Do you see me holding this mic? Yes. So, we've started this podcast, but we're making progress and we're going to grow as time goes on. But if you would like to contribute by sending a donation, investment, whatever you feel the need to give, always feel free, if you like what you hear, to Cash App us, to Venmo us, to PayPal us. Everything is all lowercase level at I Lost My Podcast. So PayPal, I Lost My Podcast. Sorry, I'm getting tongue tied. What is that thing? Cash App at I Lost My Podcast, and Venmo again, I Lost My Podcast, all lowercase letters. Feel free to donate anything, whether it's $50 to $1 to 50 cents to 5 cents. I don't care. We are most appreciative and grateful for whatever you send, or just the fact that you listen. So thank you guys for listening. We hope you contribute, and more importantly, we hope that you continue to listen to us. So yeah, just giving thanks. We love you all so much. Okay. So switching gears a little bit more. So in my book, we talk about the 5 stages of grief. Those stages are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Which of these, if any or all, have you experienced? And do you mind giving examples or elaborating on those stages?
I have experienced all of those stages across my life. And I would call myself a trauma survivor. And you experience grief. When you have encountered trauma, when you overcome one. And so I have had those iterations so much that I really just kind of roll through them now. They happen for me, but they go fast. Now, of course, you're going to come back to some things. The bargaining, when it came to Deborah, I think the times when we were at Cancer Center of America, that was my bargaining. God, if you do this, show us this, give us this sign, I felt like. And that stage probably ended after our last appointment at Meharry. I think I realized at that point, there was a gospel song, Get Right Church and Let's Go Home. It's the chorus. I felt like after that, we need to get right church because we need to make sure that we are going to be able to be in a position to see each other again. And so that's kind of where that is.
Okay. So let's talk about your grieving journey. I know we still have, but let's talk about more of your grieving journey. So walk us through it. Do you feel like you've always handled grief well, or do you not feel like you've handled grief well?
I feel like it has been a moving target. Again, I experienced trauma early in my life, and so I did not know what it was. Every day it has just always been putting one foot in front of the other. 1 second, 1 minute to get to 1 hour to get through the day. And that's kind of my approach. And when it comes to grieving, I would say, y'all know I like Peyton Manning, right?
Yes.
So I saw this interview where he was talking about how he sees things on the field when he would play. And so when I know I'm coming into a situation that might go left or has been like a death or a loss or something traumatic that I am getting ready to have to go through, for me, it is like, for some people, things go loud. For me, things go silent. And it's like I'm moving in slow motion. And the goal is just to get through the minute, to get through the hour, to get through the day. And now, that's not the healthiest way necessarily to deal with grief, but that is how I have been able to do it. Now, there have been times in my life where I have sought counseling. There have been times in my life when I have been on medication. There are times in my life when I have self-medicated with alcohol or with relationships, so the gamut. But at the end of the day, it is faith that grounds me, and I know it's faith that carries me, because there's really no way you can go quiet when everything else is loud and make it through chaos. And so that's how I am with grief.
Do you feel as though you're allowed to grieve as a woman in your everyday life? In society, do you feel like you're allowed to be vulnerable to the world with grief?
No. And a lot of that is what I pick up and carry myself, because I believe in that misconception of the strong Black woman. And when you look into that, you know that there's a whole history of Black women enduring pain because people didn't think Black women felt pain because we were Black and we weren't human. And so we take that up and we pass that on to our children. And so it's been really hard to break that cycle. So being allowed to grieve, no. I still don't allow myself to grieve. But I know that I'm supposed to. Yeah. But even in my knowing, I don't allow myself to grieve. Yeah. So
is it that you don't know how to allow yourself, or you just don't feel like you're allowed to?
I don't have time for that. I'm trying to get through the minute, the second to the minute to the hour, and that is how it plays in my head. I'm thinking about this week. I'm not thinking about Thursday, Friday. I'm thinking about where I have to be in the morning. And I just, I ask God for grace and help to get through everything else. Yeah.
That's very honest. That's very honest. How are you adjusting with life or to life without both your grandmother and your mother?
Without my grandmother, I think that probably, I don't know that I was ever successfully able to self-correct after that. I was going to magnet school, I was doing great, and when I lost her, school, things that made sense no longer made sense. And our family hadn't been the same, our family just hadn't been the same. And then with the loss of Mama Deborah, it has been difficult because I still expect to see her at every event. I am not interested in seeing anybody else in her place, in her house, in her cars, at my grandmother's dinner table. And realistically, that is not, time does not stand still when we lose people. She had a husband, our dad, who has to figure out how to carry on. That's on him. That's not on me. That's not on you. He has to figure out how to carry on. And though my heart hurts when I watch some things happen or I watch people in different spaces, I have to give that to God and know that that is not my issue. That's not my issue.
What about holidays and birthdays, adjusting with your grandmother and without your mother?
Holidays and birthdays, if Mama Deborah, you got your day. You got a day. You didn't, we might have not got together a lot of times, but we were going to get together on your birthday. And you knew you were going to have a cake on your birthday. You knew you were going to have a cake from Sweet and Sassy, from Publix, on your birthday. Or Sam's. Sam's, Sweet and Sassy, or Publix. If people are interested, Sam's, Sweet, Sassy, and Publix is where she got our cakes from. And
I think
you knew
Sweet and Sassy's going to be.
Yeah, Sweet and Sassy.
Oh, stop.
Yeah.
It's a rim shop now.
Yeah, it's a rim shop.
That's where you're going to get your cakes from. So you knew you were going to get that, and whether it was she always had something for you. Not that we are people of materialistic, but that was your moment for her to show, to share on behalf of her and dad, their love for you, for the, their token of the love for you. Christmas is a whole other. Now, I'm going to tell you, the grieving has been most difficult around Christmas. Deborah would always do the door to the house. You knew there was always going to be Christmas tree. You knew that on Christmas Eve, we were all going to be together, and we were going to exchange gifts. And, it has not been the same. Again, it was when we were teenagers, we looked forward to getting that little monetary gift so we could, pay that little extra bill or whatever. And it's like she was reading your mind. And she knew that too. And so she would always slide you a little something extra. So I missed that. Not the money, not the gift, but the way that she thought about what you needed, and would take that into consideration. And when I got married, she would gift us, but she would always slide a little gift for me on the side, because as a parent, I would just imagine you always want your child to know they're special to you, aside from everything else. And yeah, so I definitely miss her from that. And there would be times across my life where I have gotten into situations and I did need financial help, and I would, not call Dad, I would call her. And she would say it was never that they couldn't do anything. She would tell me what they could do. And even if that thing that they could do was prayer, that meant more to me than getting $1 million. Because it was the care that she took. And, loving you. So.
Are you familiar with survivor's guilt?
I am familiar with survivor's guilt.
I guess I should say, for those watching or listening, survivor's guilt is when a person feels guilty because they survived a life-threatening event that others did not. Do you feel like you've experienced that with the loss of your grandmother and your mother?
Not in the sense of what that definition is. The guilt, I feel, is about not doing more. There are times when I probably should have gone by, but I didn't want to feel sad, or I didn't want her to see me cry. And I feel guilty because I didn't make myself go. With my grandmother, I was relocated from her house to when I was 14, and the guilt is because I didn't make a bigger push to stay, because I could have assisted her more every day had I been there. So that's the kind of guilt.
That you experience. Aside from survivor's guilt, I know, and not saying that you have experienced it, but another common thing to experience with losing someone is suicidal thoughts. Have you ever experienced those thoughts with loss of your grandmother or mother?
Probably a little bit with the loss of my grandmother, because life was really still unfolding, and I just really had a hard time seeing what it was going to look like without her guidance. And I have to say, time spent with Niecy really helped me. Time spent with Mama Deborah really helped me after that. And I would say with the passing of Deborah, I didn't experience suicidal thoughts, but more of a return to some depression that I had dealt with earlier. And that has probably been the more lingering thing,
So with those, I guess, thoughts of depression, what are your thoughts with therapy?
I stay in therapy, girl.
Of grief.
I keeps me in therapy. No, but I learned a long time ago that you have to have sound counsel. You just really do. In my genetics on both sides, I am predispositioned to addictions. And once I learned that, it became more important for me to understand that you have to have sound counseling. And so that's why I stay in contact with sound counseling.
For those that may be thinking like, oh, therapy it's for crazy people, or they have this preconceived notion of what therapy might be that it might not be. How would you recommend therapy for someone that might be on the fence about it?
I would say you definitely, if you're going to pick a therapist, you want to, I can't give you any advice about that, just being honest. For myself, I've had therapists who have been within the church and outside the church. I've had therapists who've been within the church that really hurt me and took me away from the church because of the experience that I had with them as therapists. Then I've had some therapists that weren't affiliated but were spiritual people, people of faith, who were wonderful. Mm-hmm. You know, the last therapist I had was a really great guy who just didn't necessarily ever share. I never knew what his faith walk was or not, but he was probably the most impactful in helping me determine and realize that I had PTSD. I was darn near 40 years old. And so you need to do your due diligence and find out what's best for you. Mm-hmm. Do your research. Don't necessarily go by word of mouth. If you do go by word of mouth, do your research on that person. Mm-hmm. And, yeah.
Okay. So we're winding down to the last couple of questions. If you could give any advice to any other women going through grief, what would you say to them if they don't know how to maybe allow themselves to grieve, or just that it might be their first time losing someone ever in life?
I would say be gentle with yourself. A lot of times we are more gentle with others than we are with our own selves. I would say if you're a person of faith, find yourself a scripture to stand on. This is mine. Stand on this scripture right here. Mm-hmm. And just take it 1 second at a time, because sometimes thinking about tomorrow or the end of the day is too much. So that's what I would say.
Okay. So the last two questions are going to be a little roller coaster.
Okay.
This first roller coaster question is going to be more fun.
Okay.
So I guess off the top of your head, or one that just sticks out, what song comes to mind when you think of your grandmother and your mom, Deborah?
Well, the song that comes to mind when I think of my grandmother, she was a hummer. Mm-hmm. And I remember when my mom and my aunts would be going out, from a young kid, I would always be crying because I wanted to go. Or if I was supposed to be picked up for a weekend and it didn't happen, I would be crying. And eventually she would pick me up and put me on her shoulder, and she would just hum. She would pat me and hum. So that's what comes to mind when I think about that, not necessarily a song. When I think about Mom and Deborah, I think about all of our family cookouts on Healy, where the music would be blasting and Dad would be at the grill, and Mom and Deborah would be in the kitchen, and it would be Teddy's Jam. Teddy's Jam. Who is that?
Teddy Riley?
It's Teddy Riley, but it was Guy. That one CD from Guy with Teddy's Jam. Teddy's Jam for me. You know what? Okay.
Thank you.
You have to put it on here. Right. But that song would come on, and it had a really strong, lingering intro. And so the song would come on, and you might be kind of just, but by the time the song got mid-height, you were so hyped. She would be so hyped. She'd be done left the stove and be, dancing around in the kitchen. Mm-hmm. I remember that.
Okay. And then the last one. Now, to direct it to the camera, we're going to pretend that heaven has a direct television to this podcast, the I Lost My Podcast, what would you say or want your grandmother and your mother to know? Anything you want to say to them?
I would say to my grandmother, I would say that I am so thankful that because of you, I never had to come home to an empty house. You know, and because of you, I know how to make biscuits, and I'm all right. I want you to know that I turned out all right, that the things that you poured into me are still there, and I thank you and I love you for it. Now, Mama Deborah, you know, I think you want me to look at this camera. I'm gonna look at the camera. I think what I would say to Deborah is that I could not have asked for a better bonus mom. I think that so much of who I am is because of you and because of who you were to me, because of who you were to my dad and to our family. There wasn't a step in, you know, people say, well, you know, she was her stepdaughter, that was her stepmother. She really took the step out of it, and we never even discussed it. You know, it was just her way. She always included me. She never made me feel like a weekend child. And that taught me a lot about how to parent my children and give them a strong foundation so that whatever situation life takes them to, that they can be strong in knowing that, you know, they're gonna be all right. And so I know you had to go. I know you had to go. I wish you didn't have to go, but I understand today that you had to go. And that is the reward that we all look forward to at the end of the day, is getting the opportunity to go where you are. So I thank you and I love you.
Yes. Well, Sean, we thank you for participating in the I Lost My Podcast. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in, and stay tuned to the next episode. Bye, guys.
The biscuit recipe. We'll have to see you put it to this.
Lord.
Trying to see if you like that with the biscuits.